introduction. Sustainability. It seems like over a year ago since I committed to do this particular presentation. The logic was let's present on something that will be a bit of a challenge and something I'm really keen to present on, but not necessarily something I'll be entirely comfortable presenting on. I will introduce why on earth I have chosen sustainability first. So, why am I interested in sustainability? I grew up there. I grew up in industrial South Yorkshire at the point where that's Orgreave, 1980s, and just behind that cooling tower is the River Rother, which was the most polluted river in Europe at the time. Great privilege of living a quarter of a mile from there. I got out of South Yorkshire when I went to university and thought I want to do something completely different, and then did a geology-based degree, which meant I spent huge amounts of time whilst under the guise of formal education running around the Scottish Highlands, hitting things with a hammer and enjoying being outside. So that's definitely got something to do with why I find myself here presenting on sustainability. And then, having done a geology or geophysics-based degree, I stumbled out of university into a very well-paid job finding oil. And after a couple of years finding oil, I kind of travelled the world and really started to struggle ethically with where I was and the industry I was in, and kind of took the decision then that I wanted to do something different and joined rail. And I spent the last 25 years involved in railway projects. Apologies, that was the only picture I could find that fitted nicely on the bottom of that. So my aim today is to really just give you a bit of a perspective, project deliverer on sustainability, what it has become, and hopefully inspire people just to challenge a little bit more in what they do and hopefully make a difference. So I want to talk about three things. Carbon. Why carbon? Carbon dioxide is the biggest contributor to global warming, represents 80% of the greenhouse gases that contribute to that effect. Next biggest contributor is livestock. I won't be talking about livestock, talking about carbon. There's lots happening in the railway, exciting bi-mode locos, and we'll scratch the surface a little bit of what we're doing in an infrastructure world. Biodiversity is the next one of the big three. I think we all have high levels of awareness on biodiversity, but don't necessarily much of a grasp of what we need to do in the railway, certainly in railway projects, to be able to make a difference. And then the most recent bedfellow with the other two in sustainability is social value, which is definitely the most challenging to understand, and I'll try and simplify that a little bit over the course of tonight. This is not an in-depth scientific analysis of how we're damaging the planet, neither is it something that's focused on how we look after our railway assets, operations or maintenance. It's my view, and because I'm presenting on Network Rail letter-headed slides, I'm also going to put a personal disclaimer on there that says this is my view, as seen through a Network Rail Eastern lens. It is not necessarily always a Network Rail. Okay. So each of those topics we will cover in three ways. We will look at, so what are the facts? We'll try to use facts rather than greenwashing claims. So we won't be talking about PWI green diesels or beyond petroleum, as BP like to brand themselves these days. We'll talk about what the facts are around each of those headings. I'll try and relate what our Network Rail strategy is to each of those, and particularly through a lens for this part of the world. And then we'll look at, so what are we doing? I'll try and give some project-based examples and what more can we do? Okay, so that's the That's the general approach. But before we go any further, I just want to get a frustration off my chest, and that is the fact that we put sustainability together with health and safety at all. I kind of get it, because a massive driver from a health and safety perspective, if you've done your NEBOSH qualification or similar, you'll kind of recognise that our motivations in managing health and safety are legal, financial and moral. And sustainability is kind of the same. So it's all about, if you're coming at it from a mindset, which is how do we stop ourselves being fined? How do we stay on the right side of the law? How do we make sure we're doing the right thing for the business financially? How do we do the right thing ethically? Then I guess it kind of aligns with health and safety. But I think sustainability has evolved a long way from bats and bird nesting and Japanese knotweed. Great crested newts, we'll come on to them later. And it's more about how do we minimise use of raw materials, reduce our energy demands. How do we support the broader environment? So I don't think it is about. So yeah, the connection was that now something more. So I don't think it's health and safety and sustainability. I think it's sustainability in a whole load of different areas, and I think we do the wrong thing by pigeonholing sustainability into it sits alongside health and safety. Some of what we're talking about today is all about engineering, far more than it relates to health and safety. Okay, so let's get stuck into carbon. I desperately tried to align what I'm doing with the Eastern Region strategy by copying and pasting a little logo from within the strategy onto each slide. So this is the carbon logo. It's all about a railway fit for the future. And I got some stats from the Climate Change Committee, who are an independent organisation that advise government. And you will recognise the headline of net zero by 2050, I guess. And that is what that slide shows. And the carbon budget, as we set ourselves as a country, is set in 5-year increments. So it's a bit like a control period in a railway sense. And we set ourselves a level of greenhouse gas emissions as a target, and then aim to beat it. So carbon budget period 7 is the one that we set earlier this year. That's the period. So we have just set ourselves the target for the period from 2038 to 2042, which is a little square down there labelled CB7. So you can kind of see there how much we've done in the UK, and you can also see what else our challenge looks like. And there's all sorts of other terms on there that I thought I'd better look up just in case anybody asked me the question. So the shaded bits are IAS emissions. IAS emissions are international aviation and shipping. So that's our share of carbon that may or may not belong to us, but we should probably take accountability for, because it's things and people travelling in and out of the country, and it's our share of it.
It's what I was going to say, interestingly, that the IAS is what gives us a reduction since the start of that chart in transport of entirely the IAS number, because over that period, well, I won't shoot your fox, but it'll be interesting to see what transport's done over that period. Yeah.
Hold that thought.
Yeah.
Questions at the end. And effectively, the black lines, the NDC, the nationally determined contributions, is our pledge under the Paris Agreement of where we aim to be. So you can see in some cases we've pledged more than we're actually forecasting to achieve. So that's all very interesting, but what does that mean in a transport context? So another graph to get your head around. This says, in each of those carbon budget periods, where are the savings coming from? And the first bar there represents where we've got to so far, roughly, and says, actually, we've saved more than 50% of the carbon we've saved so far from energy. You kind of get that. We used to burn loads of coal. We burn far less fossil fuels, and we've driven huge savings in our carbon emissions through energy. When you look at what we're aiming to achieve through the next 3 carbon budgets and into the one we've just published, the biggest sector on there, or one of the 2 biggest sectors on there, is the bluey purple one, and that's surface transport. The surface transport represents road and rail. So collectively, how we move goods and people around the country is seen as the single biggest area of opportunity over the next 20 years. It was, that's 2023. What else do I need to explain on there? The other thing I couldn't figure out was what's engineered removals. So I thought I'd better find out what engineered removals is, that thing on the top of each sector. That's using carbon capture technology. So things like the Humber carbon capture pipeline, where we capture the carbon we produce from industry and we pipe it and stick it in underground reservoirs under the North Sea, as an example. So that's all about developing technological solutions to hide our carbon underground, in my simple terminology. Still, the biggest chunk is transport. So that's the context. What does it look like in rail? Well, we kind of use this language. We talk about, as I think everyone does when they talk about carbon, scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Scope 1 is fossil fuels, direct use of fossil fuels. So in a railway context, that's fuel we use for vehicles and gas for heating, from looking at it through a network rail lens. Scope 2 is our electricity consumption. So what carbon do we emit indirectly through the energy we use? And electricity represents over 80% of Eastern Region's energy consumption, as you'd expect. 33,500 households of energy used by Eastern Region. So that's a lot of energy. Those that it means anything to, that's 110 gigawatt hours per annum. The biggest consumer on the Eastern Region network is wires. I've got the wires in my stats. You're right, you're possibly right, but in terms of the buildings estate story, in terms of the buildings estate, it's King's Cross. And King's Cross uses nearly 2,500 households worth of energy per year. Almost 7% of the entire Eastern buildings energy bill. That's network rail, not rail industry. And I guess part of what GBR will bring is that whole system view rather than just be talking about network rail numbers. Scope 3 is everything else. So it's what carbon we create through building and disposing of infrastructure, through managing, servicing and maintaining our infrastructure. It includes diesel traction in network rail supply chain as well. As I say, this is just purely network rail data. The baseline data that I found suggested that 97% of the carbon we use in network rail is scope 3. 97% of the carbon we are responsible for is in what we build, what we dispose of, what we manage, what we service, what we maintain, rather all of the contracts we have with other people, in effect, rather than how much diesel we use and how much electricity we use. Doesn't feel like that sometimes. I'm not sure we necessarily focus on 97% of the carbon we're responsible for comes through scope 3. So yeah. So what does our Eastern business strategy say? So it talks about 3 big things. Decarbonisation starts with we're converting to electric vehicles. So converting to electric vehicles, the headline is we're going to transition to 100% of our cars and vans to zero emissions where possible over CP7. So by 2029, we'll have 2,500 vehicles across 77 sites on Eastern Region that are electric. My slight challenge with that is that's great, but that's addressing scope 1, which we've already said represents less than 3% of our overall emissions. And we might just create quite a bit of carbon in buying new vehicles, creating all the charging infrastructure and everything else that goes with delivering that program. So we kind of got to balance these things up. It's not a simple equation, is it? It's complex. Embodied carbon is all about when we're building stuff, try and build it with a low carbon footprint. That's Cambridge South Station, where we are heading towards BREEAM excellent rating, which is effectively the building industry scheme that rates the efficiency within building. We're committed to adopt some of the client carbon commitments, and there's also a British standard on carbon management within the buildings and infrastructure sector. So we're committed to apply PAS 2080. I'll show you what that means in a minute. So that's the second strand of the strategy. The final strand of the strategy is all about circular economy, which is effectively eliminating waste, reducing, reusing, recycling. Does anyone want to hazard a guess as to why we're diverting more than 99.5% of our waste from landfill and planning to recycle and reuse over 90% of it? I challenged my team, okay, what happens to the 9.5% that we're not putting into landfill, but we're not reusing or recycling? One of my team said, well, are we fly tipping it? No, we're not.
Burning.
We're burning, yeah. So it's all effectively the difference is waste that we incinerate, and the wider society incinerates, composts, and so on. So here's PAS 2080. This is engineering, isn't it? This is asset management decision making. It's one and the same. Start with, do you actually need to do it? Can you achieve what you need to without building something new? Avoid. If you can't do that, then what could you do differently? How could you modify what you're doing to try and reduce your emissions? And then beyond that, you're into, okay, if you definitely got to do it the way you're doing it, then how can you make it as efficient as possible from a carbon perspective? So we take that and we say, okay, if you're delivering a project, these are our different project complexity ratings. Project complexity 1, really difficult, multidisciplinary stuff. Project complexity 4, really straightforward stuff, and 2 and 3 are in between. We I've asked our supply chain, as you can see there, from January 2024 onwards, whenever you're delivering a project, to report on all of those things in relation to that project. So report on the embodied carbon in what you're installing, how you're thinking carbon involved in transporting it, constructing it, the emissions, what's installed, repair, maintenance, replacement, refurbishment, deconstruction of the asset once it's finished. So we, as a project, we consider all of that. All clear? I thought I'd just snapshot the safety and sustainable development dashboard that was in the meeting I was in today. There's the carbon page in the middle left. It's the bit that we haven't quite managed to get our head around how we're going to measure, or if we have, we haven't quite managed to get robust enough data from our many suppliers to be able to measure it accurately. And I do think either we're not focusing hard enough on this, or we're making it too complicated, or probably both. You know, you saw what that table looked like. So what are some game changers from a project point of view? I don't know if anyone's seen this before, but this is some bridges that were built near Stafford on the West Coast Main Line back in 2015. It was Niall Fagan who shared this example with me in a conference a while ago. And Cambridge University instrumented these bridges with thousands of sensors, effectively managing to collect data as trains ran over them. They've got 18,000 trains over these structures, monitored 24/7 over 10 months. And it really helped them understand how those bridges that were built actually behave. And it questioned, I guess, firstly, our means of bridge assessment, because what the real data told them compared to what our bridge assessment data tells us normally is that we probably build on a margin of error on top of a margin of a margin of error, and we are, based on the data from here, renewing too early, replacing rather than strengthening, and all of that has both a cost and a carbon impact. It also says what we install is massively over-designed. So 18,000 live trains, and the largest load, which I'm proud to say was high output ballast cleaner, used less than 20% of the main girder capacity that had been designed into the structure. So the challenge is, if you're putting a 3,500 ton train over it as a one-off, and that's using less than 20% of the structural capacity of the structure, then, and we see it time and again. Every time we do a bridge replacement, the bridge that goes in tends to be bigger and bulkier than the bridge we take out. We should challenge ourselves more on that. And this kind of digital twin, kind of in-depth analysis starts to enable us to do that. I had to put this one in. National Rail Awards 2017. The Sustainable Development Award went to high output ballast cleaning. Pete Flynn and I collected the award on behalf of the team. We've been ballast cleaning for a while using high output by then, and we claimed that we'd saved 2.6 million tonnes of ballast over 10 years. Actually, whilst we talked about the financial saving in terms of material quarried, is fantastic. Again, it's complex. Who's seen a high output ballast cleaner working? And you've got 44 diesel engines running. Doesn't necessarily feel like the most sustainable project in the world ever, but actually what it's achieving in terms of reducing, reusing materials is massive. And I wasn't even going to mention the fact that when we got the award, we had 5 working ballast cleaners, and we've now got 1. Perhaps there's something in that around direction of travel from a sustainability perspective too. Thinking more widely, that's the station we just opened in Anglia. That's Beaulieu Park. The headline says the first new station on the Great Eastern Main Line for 100 years. For over 100 years. It's fantastic. Great project. £160 million funded by DFT through Essex County Council. It's all about modal shift. On the face of it, 700 car parking spaces. 700 car parking spaces doesn't feel particularly green, but actually it's about getting people out of their cars and onto other modes of transport effectively. So the bus interchange, the 500 bike spaces are all about making rail travel as easy as possible. And similarly, from a freight perspective, things like the Radler interchange that we're on with supporting the build of, that's all about getting things off the roads and onto rail. And in terms of what we can do, all of us, then we've got to see our role as advocates for the railway being a more sustainable way to travel. And that's absolutely something we can all do, regardless of our role in the industry. Okay, that's carbon. Move on to biodiversity, different logo. It's a bit like McDonald's in Italy have a green M, I realised when I was there the other week, because it's all about the brand. So this is a green logo, a railway that cares for the environment. I should pause because we've got 2 people who have, one person who hasn't, Stephen's just about. Oh yeah. So we just finished carbon. Moving on to biodiversity. Shameless plagiarism from Google, but quoted along the bottom. That's kind of what comes into my head when I think about where we are on our trajectory on biodiversity. Not quite sure why the camel survives in the middle and why the deer survives at the bottom, but the logic is effectively we've got some decisions to make, and depending on those decisions, then we have different outcomes. So that's all great. But what does that actually tell us? In the same way as I did for carbon, let's dig into that a bit. So this is government data showing the long-term change and short-term change using their various latest data sets, not all of them which are bang up to date. But what jumped out at me there is the things that have both a long-term and a short-term downward trend are birds and insects in particular. But you can see there's some things that are actually doing all right, but there are other things, other species in the UK that are seriously struggling. Let's have a look in a bit more detail at one of those. And this is the data related to birds. And it's all kind of referenced back to a baseline date, and the baseline starts in different places depending on what kind of bird you are, because we started looking at different data sets at different times. So effectively, they all start at 100 at the point they started. So if you're a wintering water bird, then actually you kind of were doing all right. The thing that jumps out to me is the farmland and woodland bird species are the ones that have been in greatest decline. And actually, if we think about the rail corridor, then we probably have greatest opportunity to help support biodiversity that would be linked to farmland, because most of our railway is running through farmland. So that kind of jumped out at me from that data. So what do we consider when we look at biodiversity in rail? So the buzz term is BNG, biodiversity net gain. And effectively, it's a measure that looks at, are you leaving biodiversity in a measurably better state after a development than before the development took place? And it's a term that it fits across construction, across infrastructure development generally. It kind of originates in the Environment Act in 2021. The principle doesn't, but the measuring of the term does. And effectively, most new developments now, including railway projects, under the Environment Act 2021, have to deliver a minimum 10% biodiversity net gain target. It's all kind of back to legal requirements. And that's additional to protecting existing habitat and species. It's all about improving wherever possible. So it's creating new habitat as well as enhancing existing habitats, and thinking about how habitats connect together. And you'll hear terms for like on-site units and off-site units. So effectively, as a construction project, if you can't achieve your 10% biodiversity net gain within your project, then you can buy biodiversity net gain from organisations that will develop alternative sites and improve alternative sites effectively to give you that benefit on behalf of your project. So biodiversity net gain, as I said, is all about creating new habitat as well as enhancing existing habitats. We have a tool and metrics, as you would expect, and we, from a biodiversity perspective, we look at habitat size, habitat condition, types of habitat, and its strategic significance. So, as projects, we're striving for plus 10%. There's definitely an absolute no net loss requirement on everything. There's a bit of a grey area around renewals, and you can imagine when you have a part renewals, part enhancement funded scheme, you then get into a complexity on how much of this has got to achieve 10% biodiversity net gain and how much of it doesn't. We tie ourselves in knots around does what's been funded and what we're doing change the target? What does that look like here? For Eastern Regions, the largest of the 5 regions in Network Rail. How do I convey the size of Eastern Region? It's 157 square kilometres. I thought, what else is 157 square kilometres? And I looked on the map and realised that the area within York's outer ring road is about 80 square kilometres. So think of 2 lots of what's inside York's outer ring road, and that's what Network Rail have in terms of land on Eastern Region. 59 sites of special scientific interest within what we own. So there's a lot to go at. Coming back to finding opportunity to improve our biodiversity. Every blue dot on there is a parcel of land that Network Rail own on Eastern Region that is suitable for improvement within our own property envelope. So more than 15 metres from line side. So we're not talking about growing things that obstruct trains or drop leaves on the railway. Not under a commercial agreement. It's not under a designation that stops us developing it. So my big challenge here to project teams is when we're looking at biodiversity net gain, we need to look at what we can do with what we've got, rather than necessarily challenge ourselves to even consider. Our mainstream construction principal contractor partners in other industries would automatically default to, if we can't do it here, then we'll go and offset by buying an agreement with somebody else that creates the net gain somewhere else. I think as the railway, as a huge landowner we are, we should do more with what we've got. That's not the big challenge though. The big challenge on our estate isn't about creating diverse habitats. It's what do we do with them when we've created them? Because you kind of measure biodiversity net gain based on how what you've created is maintained over the next 30 years. Imagine that as a project. You deliver the project, you hand it back, you're done. You've got your final account, you're done. Biodiversity net gain says you can only really count it if it's there for the long term. And put yourself in a project position now, handing something back to maintenance that says, here's the great new bridge or the earthwork we've built, and here's the liability that comes with that in terms of looking after this nice wildflower meadow we've created for the next 30 years. You know, we're just not set up as a business to necessarily manage those environments. So I think there's definitely opportunity for us to, and we already are in some places, partnering with local environmental groups, and bigger organisations to say, we're creating biodiversity. What the hell do we do with it once we've created it? Who can look after it for us and get that support from other groups? What's really exciting, biodiversity and carbon, actually, in this case, project Game Changers. This is my slightly late running project at Cambridge South. What absolutely blitzes 10% biodiversity net gain. We've protected existing habitats. We've actually designed a footprint around broadleaf woodland that was there nearby. We've restored and extended a nearby nature reserve. We planted 18,000 trees, plants and shrubs, reseeded some meadow, relocated habitats that would have been lost, we've disturbed. That's all great. The challenge is, how do you do that as efficiently as possible? When you're delivering a couple of £100 million headline scheme, it's easier to accommodate that stuff than if you're doing something relatively small. We've even put green walls in, green fences, green roofs. The roof you see in the bottom right will be seeded. Talk to me separately if you want to know about how we then maintain a roof with a wildflower meadow on it. So we have and here's how technically sound. We have retained 223 biodiversity units of existing habitat and added 10% in river units. I don't know what that means, so I can't. But that is the world of biodiversity net gain. But again, what I really like about this station, go back to where we were at Beauty Park, it's about encouraging modal shift as well. This one doesn't have any car parking at all. It ties massively into the local bus network, including the busway that is now running slower than it used to. And into the park and ride. It's got 1,000 bike spaces. It's right next to Adam Brooks Hospital and a huge new biomedical campus. So it's all about providing connectivity to a new and developing part of Cambridge. So it's the right thing to do from a long-term sustainability perspective. And it's reduced the carbon footprint because we've used loads of wood. So all of that roof is glulam, which means there's nowhere near as much steel in that building as there would be for a normal construction. Another project example, closer to home, that's Thorpe Park. Thorpe Park on the outskirts of Leeds, on the Leeds York line. The station that we are building with extra wide platforms because it's a WICA funded station, so West Yorkshire Combined Authority funded station on the footprint of TRU with a likely four-tracking through there at a future point in time. So the footbridge we're building and some of the station infrastructure is being built so that the platforms, which are modular and temporary in design, can be removed to create four-line infrastructure at a later date. Why have I included that in the biodiversity section? Because as a project, we're looking at circa £1 million worth of extra cost on that rail scheme in order to offset the biodiversity impact of that huge car park because of the habitat that is being lost as a result of the fact the scheme has a car park. I think where we've missed the trick here is the biodiversity net gain ask is equally applicable to the developer who's building the whole thing and developing the housing and all the developments around it, and is creating all sorts of things to offset what they're doing. The trick we've missed is actually recognising that that station is part of a wider development, and actually, rather than considering the station as the project, the station should have been considered as part of the wider development in terms of its biodiversity net gain. And we're just starting to talk to the government and Universal Studios about a new station at Wixham, south of Bedford, to a new 4-platform station to support the Universal Studios development there. We've got to do that with that development as well. I can't imagine you're building a theme park and not creating 10% biodiversity net gain. And I would imagine a station is a drop in the ocean compared to everything else that's been built. So we need to make sure our net gain is reflected in that wider project. Right, I promised a newt. I thought that's an upside down newt just to show that it's a great crested one and it's got a speckled belly. This is kind of the opposite end of biodiversity. Kind of goes back to what I've seen over the last 20 years and how we've evolved. They're delivering lots of track records. We start off with newt surveys, and this is all about legal compliance, isn't it? We need to do a newt survey because we can't affect great crested newts. If there are great crested newts there, then we can't work. We need to encourage them to move. And then we got cleverer and thought, actually, rather than doing a newt survey, maybe we get an ecologist out on site. And it's a great job if you're an ecologist working nights, 5 nights a week with a ballast cleaner, and basically you're employed to spot newts. And if you spot one, you're the most popular person on site because you basically tell everyone they can finish early and go home. You know, so that wasn't great from an economics and project delivery point of view either. So we then moved to newt sniffer dogs. We basically had for a number of years where we would get dogs out on site to walk the site beforehand to see if they could detect newts. Possibly well in advance of the work, so we didn't mobilise and finally couldn't work. And my personal favourite was when we had licensed newt handlers walking ahead of track renewals, particularly ahead of the ballast cleaner, with buckets and rubber gloves, picking newts up that they saw, and effectively, because they were licensed to handle them, we could protect the ones we saw. I think what we do now is far better. So on the Midland Main Line, and I think more broadly now, but partly because of the Midland Main Line project, we effectively set up newt offsetting. So we've got a contract in place with a company called Nature Space, who develop new habitats on our behalf. So effectively, we can justify that we are creating happy places for newts to thrive in existing newt-friendly environments, which more than offsets a few that might happen to stray onto the railway when we're doing work. That feels like a far more pragmatic solution than stopping the work because there's a newt seen ahead of a ballast lead. So in the deep and complex world of biodiversity and all that comes with biodiversity, again, there are some small success stories around where we're just getting better at doing the small stuff. So, social value, the last of the three, a way that helps communities thrive is a key logo there. The social value is effectively the positive contributions an organisation makes to the environment, society, and the economy, is the definition that I found. It kind of gets put into focus through, most recently, through the Procurement Act. And the Procurement Act describes economic, social, and environmental elements and requires for certain types of project, businesses effectively need to take social value into account. And if we think biodiversity is difficult to quantify, social value is a whole different world. So by law, under the Procurement Act 2023, and coming into force this year, public sector procurement has to have a minimum 10% of its contract evaluation weighting based on social value. So if we're letting a track renewals framework, or we're letting a contract for providing a service within the railway environment, 10% of scoring in how we evaluate that contract is based on social value. So the terminology kind of moves from most economically advantageous tender to most advantageous tender, and it's logical. It's driven by government policy. It's all about job creation. It's about creating diversity in the supply chain. It's about encouraging small, medium-sized enterprises, not subject matter experts. There's a completely confusing acronym if ever there was one, SMEs. And then you get things like contracts. For more contracts that are worth more than £5 million in value, you must have social value KPIs. So we have at least 3 social value KPIs on anything more than £5 million in value. So we're creating a little mini industry for the right reasons. And to help cut through some of that, the Rail Safety and Standards Board have created their social value tool on behalf of the industry. And relatively recently within Network Rail, we've taken social value and rolled it into the sustainability family. So it sat separately before. And the RSSB tool looks at social value in different ways. So employment and economics, so that's about, are you creating jobs, apprenticeships, what kind of jobs are you creating? Health, training and skills is around mentoring, relationships, training you're providing, health interventions you're providing for your workforce. Supply chain is all about spend through SMEs, spend through local organisations. Community picks up volunteering, donations, stakeholder engagement, and then there's an environmental category, which is complete double counting because that talks about carbon and biodiversity. I made the mistake when I was researching this of downloading the list of metrics that are included in the Rail Social Value tool. They come as a spreadsheet with over 1,000 lines. So yeah, you kind of look down at line 352 and it says are you offering yoga to your workforce or something along those lines? And it's worth this. The breadth of things that you can quantify as social value beneficial are mind blowing. So what have we done on Eastern? So we've said actually can't realistically expect everyone to report on to input into a tool with over 1,000 metrics and try and make sense of it. So we focused on 11 things, and those 11 things are kind of grouped into employment and skills. So we say look at those 5 things. Social inclusion, and then how much are you spending with SMEs? Even that isn't easy. All of my frameworks on Eastern Region are Eastern Region wide. So by definition, local is somewhere between Berwick and Lowestoft. But when you've got a framework and you're saying what percentage of your workforce are local, how is that within 25 miles of each specific job? Is it living on Eastern Region? Is it living within 25 miles of Eastern Region? Yeah. So there are some challenges even then. What constitutes stakeholder consultation event? How do you normalise charity donations? It's difficult. I suppose Network Rail tries to lead by example. So one of the things we do is offer every employee 5 days volunteering leave. We're not great at using it. So our aim as a business is to try and encourage at least 15% of our workforce to take at least 1 day of volunteering leave, which is pretty low, really, isn't it, as a target? But there's quite a lot done with community rail partnerships, station adoption groups. There's a lot happens within the industry more broadly. And we set a bizarre target. Well, not a bizarre target. You need a target. So the target we've set within Eastern Region for social value is for every £2 that we spend on renewals and enhancement projects, we'll generate £1 of social value. And just understanding whether that's really attainable. So we're doing a big project at Darlington, and we're at about 10% social value. So for every £1 that we spend, we can kind of calculate there's about 10%, about 10 pence of social value we're adding. And we think that's a pretty good project in terms of how much BAM and Siemens and others are doing in terms of community engagement. So £1 of social value for every £2 spent is tough. What I'm trying not to get hung up on is actually if I got our supply chain to fill in all 1,000 metrics on the tool, then would we be able to get to 50 pence in the pound? We probably would, but would it be worth the effort? And does it really matter? Actually, what we're trying to generate here is culture change and people to be looking at the right things. So I'm trying not to get too hung up on we're not achieving £1 in every £2 spent, and just trying to focus on are we doing the right kind of stuff. Examples. Middlesbrough Station. This is a scheme that we've recently delivered in a number of phases for Tees Valley Combined Authority. And Tees Valley Combined Authority had particularly stringent challenges for us, given the money was funded from DFT through them around the value they needed us to add in Teesside through the project. So project is 3 phases. Phase 1 is extending the existing platform so LNER can start running services between Middlesbrough and London again. Done. Phase 2, if people knew Middlesbrough Station beforehand, you used to come out the subway, come up some stairs, which effectively put you at first floor level on top of here, and there was a nightclub under that huge station forecourt. So phase 2 was removing the nightclub, putting in a steel frame, creating some shop units, and basically creating a level walkway from the subway straight through to outside. So what you see in the second picture is the finished job. What you see in the third and fourth pictures is what it looks like under that undercroft. In that undercroft now, we finished the job. So you come straight out the subway and continue rather than going upstairs. It very, very nicely put some bricks on the walls to show where the stairs used to be, where you used to go upstairs as you came out of the subway. Why have I included this project? I'm not going to say who the principal contractor was, but they worked really hard. They took the finding local suppliers bit really seriously, and they were encouraged by the local authority to use local suppliers for steelwork, for concrete, for general labour, and their programme suffered massively because of it. Ended up with suppliers that they didn't have existing relationships with, suppliers that didn't understand the railway environment, suppliers that were really quite contractually aggressive, suppliers that had potential political relationships as well as relationships with the supply chain. And in hindsight, I think everyone involved has said, we absolutely do need to work hard to work with local organisations wherever we work. There are lower risk areas that we should go to first. So general labour, maintenance, cabins, security, fencing, painting and decorating, not steelwork supply, not necessarily demolition. So where we are using local businesses, let's absolutely do that, but let's choose carefully so we don't get ourselves into project delays. We're just about to start phase 3 as well in Middlesbrough, which is an additional platform, which is all about increasing capacity to run more trains in Middlesbrough. So that's another platform into there as well. Sometimes you get projects that just have a broader remit that is all about driving social change. No more so than this one. So that's effectively Northumberland County Council's words. Sorry, it's wordy, Colin. That's the most wordy slide I think I've got in the pack. Northumberland County Council, this is all about delivering social value. It's about improving access to employment, hubs, education and travel. Yeah, it's all about stimulating regeneration in Ashington, in Blythe, those communities. And he's having a massive positive impact. So that's not us getting hung up about how we measure it. I'm sure Northumberland County Council are really working hard to measure it to demonstrate what the project's achieved. But from a rail perspective, we can stand back and look at it and say we've made a massive difference to the local community. So 4 out of the 6 stations are open, and the remaining 2 that are at Bedlington and Northumberland Park, which is a metro interchange, are open early next year. So passenger numbers are well ahead of forecast, and it's doing really well. Something else that really ought to get credit from a social value perspective, but isn't measured currently in a metrics way, is improving accessibility to the railway. I haven't included any level boarding pictures. This is all about accessibility from an access for all perspective. But our commitment to deliver an increase in the diversity of our customers by making the railway more accessible to all is massive. Does anyone want to hazard a guess and try and name those 4? Some of them are much more difficult than others. Go off at the top left, the first beacon bridge in the country. Selby at the bottom, yeah. Billingham middle. Billingham? Is it? I think it's Billingham. And then it's not a lot to go on it. It's Bridlington, the top right, but there's not really a lot to see, is there? The lift and some stairs. But all of that is incredibly positive and not measured. And I guess just to give a wider perspective, scouting around, this popped up. bear in mind, I'm scratching my head at 10% for Darlington, thinking, is it worth going beyond that? Here's a different perspective. So this is Northern's perspective. The headline in their social value report for last year is we are generating 1.2 billion of social value benefit versus our 1.07 billion turnover. So they're well over 100% turnover in terms of the social value they're generating. Yeah, and see, it kind of leaves me thinking, it's all about messaging, isn't it? It doesn't really matter. It's all about driving the right change, and I couldn't get my head around how I'd measure that in a project world to that level of detail. I'm not sure we get a great deal of value from doing it, but it's pushing the right agenda and driving people to look at the right things. As long as in the world of GBR, someone doesn't put Northern and Network Rail projects in a league table and say, Ben, why are you only at 10% when they're at 110%? That doesn't happen. Because we are measuring completely different things. Okay, so that's it. So just a couple of key messages to finish. I'll start by just going back to where I started in saying, let's focus on strengthening the link between engineering and sustainability, because actually so much of what we talked about today is all about engineering, whether it's asset management or designing the right solution or building the right thing in the right way. So much of it comes back to engineering. And we've definitely got to get the balance right between how we measure stuff, because you can get lost in metrics, versus how do we just ethically drive the right kind of solutions. Carbon, the headlines are all, well, two things. It's the reduce, reuse, recycle mantra, which is all about effective asset management, not renewing things too early, not overspeccing, minimising to what we really need to do. Pushing for effective materials reuse. Maybe we should do more ballast cleaning. Maybe we should find a way of effectively cascading rail and sleepers. That's probably the best place to start, I think. But there's that broader piece there as well. Our big role as rail industry professionals is to be an advocate, to drive modal shift, to encourage others to use the train. Biodiversity, I think, so let's go back a bit. Biodiversity, it's all about minimising impact, but I think I just want to come back to, we are such a huge landowner. I think we've got to challenge ourselves more within the railway to do more within our boundaries, make more use of all the land we own, and come up with sensible ways to be able to manage diverse habitats that we create, rather than selling the problem to someone else. And then the mind-boggling social value. I think focus on a small set of things, do the right thing. As I said, we're looking at a handful of metrics rather than 1,000. Supply chain, giving back to communities that we work in, investing in people. It's common sense stuff to do. It's as the Northern slide shows, it's not necessarily about what you measure. It's about where you put your focus, where you engage people. Okay, hopefully that's been interesting. Bit of a whistle-stop tour through my lens in projects rather than anything else, but hopefully with a little bit of learning along the way.
Yeah, firstly, thanks. Thank you, Steve. And what I'm going to do is, Stephen is here. While I set up to swap and put some slides back on the screen, Ben, you can field your own questions, or Louise can field questions. But are there any questions, Louise? Yeah.
Any questions online?
If not, I do have a starter piece to get people excited. Oh no, go on. Yeah.
At least one brief. Thanks for that. Really interesting. But going back to your carbon topics and your scope 1, 2, and 3, and your focus all appears to be almost exclusively on scope 1. What moves are there, which is such a small proportion of your for carbon consumption, carbon damage that it causes? What are you looking beyond that at the moment?
We are, but not necessarily in as joined up a way as I think we should. Okay, the big deflection from me, having just been through that, is I focused entirely on what I could glean from Network Rail, and there's clearly a broader carbon agenda as an industry, which is weighted towards how do we decarbonise locomotives and rolling stock, as much as it is about how do we decarbonise our infrastructure. So I think that's the natural next place to go, isn't it? And I think, given the costs and the business case for changing that is more challenged by a fragmented industry, I hope that as we come back together as an industry, that becomes easier. But there's some good examples of where we're doing great stuff. I think it's being more systemic in what we do. It's the challenge.
Any other question? Oh yeah, go on, Liz.
So, a lot of new stations, the idea that you've got them getting modal shift, people are sort of not doing some journeys by car, which is about 97% of a massive reduction in carbon. How do we sort of go back and look at historic projects you worked on, for example, and say actually, because there's this new station placed here with these excellent transport links, do you ever look back and that did achieve a big step change in people deciding to go by train? Or is it once the project's over, the focus is right, we'll see on the next one?
It's a good challenge. I think in the project world, we're very focused on delivering what's in front of us. Actually, I probably think from a Network Rail perspective, we are largely tasked with delivering projects that are in front of us, particularly when money is flowing through third-party assemblies and local government. And actually, the proof of the pudding in terms of, okay, did that business case actually stack up in the end, tends to sit with the local authority rather than with Network Rail. The Northumberland line's a great example. Our task was to deliver a whole load of infrastructure for a budget. The business case around the investment, securing the money, sat with the local authority. Having similar discussions now with South Yorkshire Combined Authority and West Yorkshire Combined Authority around their new stations. We are delivering feasibility and design work for them that then leads into business cases for new stations. We should challenge ourselves more, because quite often now the local authorities aren't as transport savvy as perhaps we are. So it needs to be a partnership in developing a business case to deliver a new station, rather than necessarily saying yes, someone with some money in a business case.
Go on.
Tremendous, Ben. Really interesting. Thank you. How is this feeding into engineering education and training within Network Rail and more broadly to equip people to handle and deal with and challenge and question all that you've raised?
Louise is jumping in.
Excellent.
So actually, yesterday, in this very room, I did the carbon literacy training. So this is something that's being rolled out. I think East was doing an awful lot on it, and a lot of the sort of things that are coming up sort of vaguely familiar from yesterday, which is good, actually sank in. So training is being rolled out for private business, but it hasn't reached everywhere yet.
No.
But I think it's incredibly valuable. Like a lot of things like talking about sort of in the track design, rail, sleepers, ballast, it's all incredibly energy intensive and high embodied carbon. But actually the big 97%, the big thing is changing people mode of transport from car to track.
It's changing decision making, we do.
So if you can make a more reliable railway, if you're helping to contribute to that, you're making a huge difference, more so than the extra embodied carbon you've got in rails, concrete, ballast. So there is education movement rolled out to business and children more.
Well, the Parliament Institution with its training courses delivers a sustainability section within its training courses delivered by some Scottish numpty. And I emphasise within that training, it's me. I emphasise within that
Did
training.
you know that? Were you building him up?
Yeah, I emphasise within that training that the way that people think about sustainability is often upside down, and that actually the best thing that and I talk about this with the context of electrification as a key example, is that the biggest mistake that was made by our industry is suggesting that electrification is about decarbonising railways, when that is absolutely one of the least important things that you're electrifying the railway for. The main reason you're electrifying the railway is because it gives you a railway that is far better at driving modal shift, because you can fit more trains on for a much more efficient means, and so on and so on. So that training is something that is lacking. That understanding is lacking.
Just my broader point, Gareth, is what Ben's just highlighted tonight, for people to be able to understand it, build it into their job.
Yeah.
That's a big,
Yeah,
it's just equipping people to do that. What's in my mind?
I think the engineers entering the industry today are far more aware and come equipped to be able to make good decisions with sustainability in mind
Sure.
than those that have been here for a long time and are perhaps having to learn.
Yep.
And relearn. It'd be good to ask some of those on the call and PWI membership that are currently students, how much does sustainability feature on your syllabus? Your point, really, the reason I put that graph up is because it's all about reducing the impact of transport rather than reducing the impact of.
I'm glad you put this up, and the people online can't see this because I've swapped over to put but the point I want to make in line with this is that we haven't reduced our carbon emissions from transport since 1990 in the UK. So it's been flatlining that entire time, despite electric vehicles, despite all those much more efficient engines running, because we move so much more by road. And that's why this chunk is so big, is because that's all we've got. Transport is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in all the developed world now. The UK is certainly one of them. And rail has to be the backbone of the solution. EVs cannot be the total solution, which unfortunately is what current policy is from government, is EVs will magically solve this problem, despite the fact that that doesn't work from a distribution network perspective, let alone 100 other things. So yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that, Ben.
It's too scary politicians to think of anything else,
Yeah.
because the changes in society that reduction in road transport mean are politically scary.
Electricity, all our reductions.
How do you sell that
Yeah.
to a population which has grown up effectively car dependent? The nature of society since the 1960s and today has changed dramatically. And if you look at the growth in road-based transport over that period, I mean, it's just, rail, we're back where we were in the 1950s now in terms of people miles. We're probably carrying more passenger kilometres than we have.
We doubled our modal share since 1990. An extremely good news story.
But that's against, when you look at what road, how much road transport, it is quite scary. Because you start to look at the shape of society, the way we do things has to change if we're going to make that reduction.
Ben, I had a question before which was related exactly to Stephen's point, which is this within both the biodiversity stuff, but particularly the social value stuff. There's a lot of let's get everyone excited, like really stuck into trying to justify lots of fiddly details whilst ignoring some of the big critical things, like, for example, accessibility, which is a very easy thing to measure as a metric. It's just that as soon as you start looking at it as a metric, it requires money. What are your thoughts on that and why we're omitting that? Yes, we've got 50 AFA schemes, they're all behind, but what?
I think part of the challenge we face within projects is we're trying to come up with metrics that we can measure at project level and we can hold suppliers to account for. So therefore we don't look at things that are all about driving modal shift or how effective a project has been in the longer term. We're desperately trying to find things that we can measure that are all about how is that supplier performing now, or how is this project comparing to that project, which is why we end up with a really quite narrow perspective. And I think in many ways, funding arriving with us for enhancements through regional and local government is great, because it means there's a real local desire to get the scheme delivered. It makes benchmarking which schemes are more successful and which ones less successful really, really difficult, because there's no single coordinating point for, so what was the end result?
Yeah.
No one's bringing that back together again to say, so what did our spend there get us in terms of passengers or benefit for social value compared to these ones?
I mean, the interesting question in my mind is the travel patterns in this country and the what we use travel for, the nature of transport have changed so dramatically since Beeching pruned the network in the mid 1960s. Why do we assume that the network that Beeching left, which is largely the network we have today, with a few extra stations thrown in here and there, why do we assume that that is the network, the ideal network? It might have been the ideal network in 1966, but there is absolutely no rationale that says it's the ideal network today, because travel has changed so dramatically, because there's 7 or 10 times as much road traffic now as there was in 1966. No one is asking that. Well, maybe they are.
Well, I have the podcast to recommend you.
Austria and Switzerland and Germany and Italy,
Yeah,
but they're not asking it in this country.
I think that's part of the challenge, isn't it? When you look further afield outside the UK, you see lots of examples where that societal shift towards rail is in a different place to where we are in the UK.
And having a louder industry voice feels like a good thing, which is why maybe having an organisation that is more publicly prominent by its name being more visible could be a good idea. Go on, Steve.
I was going to say,
I'll let Stephen ask and then we'll come back. Stephen, go on.
So is that just down to the rail industry? Because you've got Cambridge South. It's got a good bus interchange there. And what's the bus pattern like? It's no good having a new station if people can't get there.
Yeah,
Agreed.
And I think since denationalisation,
I think
people forget that these companies are there to make a profit, not to provide a service. So
I think the two stations we've built in Anglia at Cambridge South and Bewley have both, to be fair, the local authorities have really embraced the opportunity. The whole bus network has been changed around Bewley Park. We've got a bus interchange there with half a dozen bus spaces. And you know, it's all about just taking people out of Chelmsford. Bewley Park's all about straight off the A12 or whatever it is there, or straight out of the suburbs, straight to the station and into London. Rather than
Within the last 5 or 6 years, there has been a change of emphasis. I mean, it was actually started by the last Conservative administration, is now been carried on by Labour, which is actually giving regional transport authorities the powers to actually specify a bus network and subsidise a bus network. But almost going back to the Transport Commissioner's days and getting away from this idea that buses are only there to make profit for bus companies.
the regional assemblies now have a pot of money for transport. Effectively, the spending review this year allocated money to regions for transport, not for rail or for bus. I mean, there are certain headline schemes, but part of the opportunity for us in rail is to say how much of that we align ourselves with, and how does it tie in with the other.
We need to stop thinking about ourselves as just, we stop thinking about railways per se
Versus other
about
roads, yeah.
railways as a part of an overall transport system.
Yeah.
I mean, railways are fantastic. I love railways. I'm lifetime railway. My father and grandfather were lifetime railway. So I'm embedded in the industry, but it only worked. I mean, I spent the last 8 years of my professional career before I joined the PWI, my transport career, working at TfL, and TfL works really well because it integrates across modes. And the rest of the country needs to do the same if we're ever going to get anything resembling integrated transport.
Yes.
Yeah, now going back to your point earlier, Stephen, you were talking about road transport. It would be lovely to halve it, but I imagine whoever was Chancellor at the time would probably be crying when they realise how much revenue they've suddenly lost.
Well, that
Yeah,
becomes
it's a serious-
we solve that.
Well, but EVs are doing that already,
Yeah.
because every time somebody buys an EV, that's a load of fuel tax that don't get any.
I know, I mean, unfortunately, EV has very limited range. I mean, I know that the parcel company, DHL, will only operate their EV vans within a 15-mile radius. They simply can't do any further because in bad weather, lights, heaters, wipers, goodbye battery.
I'm in danger of taking over Gareth's role as chair and saying, shall we continue this in the pub? So I'll let Gareth.
Yeah, go on, pop the teams back up.
Rather than me.
Well, there are a couple of questions in the teams. If you bring the teams chat back up on the screen, wait a minute, then you do. So, not that one, that one. Yes, that's perfect. There are two questions online that we'll take. One from Naveed, which is, does Eastern have an initiative around number of trees that are being cut and timber? Anything about timber generally that you can talk about?
Not specifically, Naveed, we don't capture that as a specific measure, but on a project by project basis, the source of the timber is taken into account in the BREEAM evaluation. So use of sustainable timber is kind of quantified and given a positive kind of positive impact on the metric.
And conscious that this needs to probably be a dedicated PWI or Rail EI session, Matthew Thompson is asking about recovering materials. From an Eastern perspective, are you doing anything differently now about recovery of materials with contractors than you were, say, 4 or 5 years ago?
Presumably we're talking about track. So we are that there certainly from a renewals point of view are serviceable sleepers and serviceable ballast available now for delivery. And I think the national ballast supply is getting better at sorting ballast and providing a serviceable product back. The challenge is there's a whole lot of transport involved in that. It would be far more logical from my perspective to sieve the ballast and decide what's serviceable or not and put it back in at source on site rather than necessarily take it across the country to do that. We've always struggled on rail because whilst there is a rationale that says you can take rail from the East Coast Main Line that's fit for 125 miles an hour one day and put it into a secondary route and it should be fine, there's still a desire to want to fully understand the defect history of what you're taking out and translate that defect history to where you're putting it in. And understanding the provenance of an individual section of rail and being able to say, yeah, here's what we've done there and here's how it's now translated into that new route is something we've never managed to do.
Has anybody ever looked at what was done in the results of what was done in the 1980s then? Because I mean, I was renewals engineer at Preston, and we took a huge amount of rail out of the West Coast Main Line, some of which was probably only fit to be cut up, but some of which was old but not noticeably generating vast quantities of defects. And we put a lot of it into the Cumbrian coast and on the settlement of Carlisle. And I've always wondered, because I then sort of, as one does in one's career, buggered off and did something else. And I've always wondered, you know, did anybody do a back check on how the rail that we put into the Cumbrian coast performed in that environment in terms of generating defects compared to,
I don't.
was it worth it?
And in the early 80s, every weekend for at least a year, I remember working on removal from West Coast Main Line. And it would then the next weekend go into the GNSW or the Stranraer line.
Ah, right.
And where there was defects in the rail on the West Coast, those were removed before it got picked up and taken.
Yeah.
It didn't get moved with someone having to remember.
So I think
We did. So, yeah.
Two observations. I think our current methods of track replacement tend to be optimised around removing track in 64.
Sure.
panels,
Exactly.
which is where we are currently as an industry. And I think were we to find ourselves in a place where we had a lot of rail and sleeper to remove systemically, then I think that the big opportunity there, the big prize there, is to say, how do you develop something on the back of that that then recycles and uses it locally rather than it necessarily all disappearing.
And we, as I say, that is a session we need to dedicate because it's such a material removal is itself such an interesting thing that we often come back to in this discussion. I'm going to do something a little unconventional. Stephen's joined us very kindly. Stephen, you've joined because this is one of your sections and you've enjoyed the session, but I've got a joint thing. So you did a really detailed session last month. I proposed something slightly
Very feeble in the audience.
I proposed something slightly different, which is that if you get comfy, I've got some slides that I kind of used last night for Rail Natter about this, which you're welcome to go out and watch. But what I'll do is whiz through these and let you pick up. But what I might do is whiz through them so we definitely get to the end, because I've got literal step-by-step instructions on how to vote, and then you come back to some of the points. So key point is that please go and vote. But the vote is now open. You'll all have an email or a postal vote, some of you, but I think everyone should here and elsewhere should have received the email, which has a specific bespoke link to you in it.
And
really key.
even as you receive an email, you'll also receive a one pager. It may not have arrived yet, but certainly Civica were sending them out yesterday. A one pager which has the same codes on it. So even if you've lost it in your junk and spam folder in your emails, you will get the same codes and a website address that you can go into and read your vote.
So that's kind of so the key thing is the voting is open. Of all the people who vote, 75% need to be voting in. Now you're here, I can't be quite as blunt. If Stephen wasn't here, I'd say must vote for the correct answer. But now Stephen's here, I say, well, hopefully vote for what is the supported by the organisation answer, which is that we become the Rail EI. So that's a really key point to emphasise. 75%. That makes me nervous, not because I don't think that we'll achieve it, but it is a very high threshold to me. It's a very high threshold to me.
Yeah.
So this is really nice. A graphic. There's 8 reasons why, and we picked these up last time. But what I'll do is I'll dwell on these briefly for Stephen to go through. These are from a graphic from the journal, I believe. But I tell you what, you and I can double at this one if you like. I'm conscious of time, which is why I'm cantering.
But do canter. I mean, frankly, there's 8 reasons that we quote, but it's all about recognition and definition.
Yeah.
Because out in the big wide world, people don't understand what permanent way is, even within our industry. We did a lot of consultation, a lot of work on who knows what, why do people want to be members, why do people not want to be members of our institution? And one of the biggest hurdles that even within the industry, people don't understand what permanent way means. And even amongst those people who do understand or think they understand what permanent way means, there are 2 camps. There is one camp that vehemently believes that permanent way is everything from fence A to fence B. And there's another camp that thinks that permanent way is just another word for track. And it's quite disturbing trying to have a conversation with people who have such fixed, not to say vehement views, which are actually at odds with each other, but they both want to stay the permanent way institution. My view is that we are about railways. Railway is what everybody in the outside, the world of normal people understands. And yes, there are other institutions that have got it into their head that we want to trespass on their turf. And we want to be the institution for signal engineers. We want to be the institution for rolling stock engineers. We don't. We want to be an umbrella organisation for railway engineering that, if you like, doesn't take over the expert world of railway signals, but does try and explain where the world of railway signals fits within the bigger pattern of what is the railway system of systems. And the same with rolling stock. I mean, we are very interested in vehicle track interaction and the part that rolling stock design, suspension design, wheels, all that sort of stuff plays in wheel rail forces, and therefore the forces the track has to cope with. And exactly the same with pantograph, contact wire, catenary interaction.
Platform crane interface, accessibility.
Another one, yeah. And nobody's looking at, no other institution is even attempting to give that sort of breadth of what does the railway system look like. There are institutions in Germany, Switzerland, Austria, so you'll be amazed to learn, which actually are about railway engineering and actually look at the whole picture. So I'd like to be like that. I'd like to have a name like that, which gives the institution a platform to build that sort of recognition. Within the world of wider engineering, railways had a profile that's subterranean. And it's really only since the PWI turned up at the Royal Academy of Engineering and the Professional Engineers Committee, which is the group of all the chief execs of professional, the 39 professional UK institutions, that anybody mentions railways. When I first started going to meetings, railways were just a non-subject. People talked about the air transport, people talked about road transport. Nobody mentioned railways, despite the fact we have a railway division of the IMechE and the IRSE, who have been long-term members. Just railways were not on the agenda, and the same with politicians. So we need, I mean, so it's all about recognition of railway, that we are about railways, and it's providing that sort of air cover, that overarching sort of railways as a system, and providing it from an institution which has a history of being open. We are open. We've always been an open membership organisation. You don't have to be a super duper engineer. I mean, we love having super duper engineers as members. We love having chartered members and incorporated members and EngTech members. But basically, if you're interested in railway engineering, we're interested in having you as a member, and we've always been like that. And it doesn't matter whether you basically shovel ballast for a living or whether you do super duper structural design using the latest computer programs. If you're interested in railway engineering, we'll offer you a home. And same with project managers, logisticians, planners. You know, our vice president in the northwest of England is actually a project manager who's come up. He started his career as train crew and worked his way up through the driver management leg, and then went into project management for Northern Trains, and he's now our vice president for the Northwest, and a great guy he is too.
I'm glad you pick up that point, because that's something that you said last month that kind of made me feel extremely proud of the organisation, proud of our legacy as much of where we're facing forward.
We have welcomed people in the way that the history of most other professional engineering institutions has been an exclusive and elite club that you have to sort of get on your hands and knees and beg to be able to join. And we're just not like that. We are open and we're democratic. And yes, as I say, we love having chartered engineers and incorporated engineers, but they are not the be all of our institution.
Not that I'm going to stop Steve's flow, but I'll just pop a few of the other slides up. So there are drop-in sessions every Wednesday between now and the end of the 4-week session, which is 18th of December, I think is the end of the date. 16th, sorry, it was the 18th.
Midday on the 16th, yeah, the results announced on the 18th.
And so there are these drop-in sessions. If you're interested, if you want to hear some more of the discussion.
Well, I say beware, because I have sat in on those drop-in sessions, 12:30 to 1:30 every Wednesday, and so far we have not had one person join in.
Really?
Yeah, really. We've run sessions for fellows and sessions for registered engineers and various sort of targeted sessions for targeted groups, and they've actually had a reasonable turnout. We've actually had sort of half a dozen people on a call and got a decent debate going. But on the general Wednesday sessions, nobody.
Interesting. Well, it's good that they are there. A little bit about what happens after the vote is that either things progress or
Or they don't.
or they don't. It's kind of, I'm not going to dwell on that. That doesn't really require much explaining. But this is the crucial bit, which I'm going to explain and then kind of hand back to Stephen. Stephen, cut in if I'm saying anything wrong. You will receive an email that looks like this. It will have a button. Hit the button. It should have your name in it. If it doesn't, then your records are out of date and you need to chase with HQ. But you'll have an email. You will click the email. You will see this page and you'll see 4 nice stages at the top. You should, having clicked the link in your email, this will be autofilled, hence why I've oranged my code in so you can't nick it, but I voted already, so there's nothing you can do. Click the login button, and then what you need to do is click the 4 button here, and then press next page. So click, just for clarity, click the 4 button there, and then you click the next page. You need to then click. You will be asked to confirm your selection. So it's a confirmation of the vote. This is bona fide, by the way. It's run by CS,
Civica Electoral Services. And any of you who are members of the National Trust, the Co-op, most trade unions, the Institution of Civil Engineers, the Institution of Mechanical Engineers, and have ever voted on any of these things, you'll recognise the format because it's their standard. It's basically their standard product, customised for us. They've got 120 years of experience. They know exactly what they're doing, and it all works.
This is a big deal, and it has to be robust. It has to be transparent and such. And having pressed confirm, you'll then get the final page, and you can just either close the page or click log out or whatever you want to do. That is how you do it. I was going to say, I'll put up a slide just so that you can go through that. But that is that's obviously my own view on that, but that's the process. You have the email. That's the process you want to follow. You have the ability to make your decision based on what you think. But if you are going to click on something that isn't to vote for the motion, get my personal number and we'll have a chat. That's not a threat. That's a genuine, let's have a conversation. Come for a pint now and we'll talk about it. But anyway, sorry. So Stephen, I'll let you have that back. I just wanted to go through specifically exactly what you need to do
I have made the case. I mean, there's loads and loads of stuff on the internet, on the PWI website about why we've chosen not to incorporate the term infrastructure, about why we're proposing the name we are proposing. It's not the first one we thought of, but it's the one that we can robustly defend against in a trademark dispute.
It has fewer words in it than the one.
Yes,
from
it
which
does.
makes me prefer it. Yes, that's efficient.
And I think people who are fellows have sort of kicked up about the idea of being a fellow of Rail EI, which means Frail EI, which spells Frail EI. But then, having spent the last 30 or 40 years as a mice, then I'm really fairly robust against this sort of thing. And people don't describe. I don't wander around saying I'm a fellow of the FPWI or MICE. I'd actually describe myself as a member of the Institution of Civil Engineers, or a fellow of the Permanent Way Institution, or a chartered member of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, because they're the words that people understand. People don't generally talk, at least in normal conversation, in sort of
post-nominals.
So, I do understand the what's the word? The nostalgic appeal, the heritage of the PWI. I mean, I've been a member since 1975, and I have to confess that until about 2016, 17, I didn't think that name change was necessary. I thought we could actually explain to people what Permanent Way was and how it. And
quicker than I was. November 2023 was my Damascene.
But we've spent 10 years effectively knocking our head against a brick wall, we've had, it was quite a revelation when our market research people did their sort of review of what people know about us, and what 10 years on, 10 years of. This is the PWI, this is the Permanent Way Institution. Do we market ourselves as Permanent Way Institution? Do we market ourselves as PWI? Do we market ourselves as both? Let's try it all. And at the end of it all, people still don't know who we are or what we do. So hence railway, because you just say railway and people go, oh, yes, I know that. Yeah, know what a railway is. Easy.
So conscious of time, Stephen, thanks very much for the pitch. Stephen, are you able to join us at the refreshment
yes.
location? So there'll be more
Well,
conversation if you want to
coming
come.
up here in
Yeah.
the first place
Yeah.
is to have a beer, yeah.
Everyone, thanks. This one's gone very long, but we wanted this bit is really worthwhile. With voting having opened, this is really, really important. It's your institution, and if you feel as passionately about it as I do, then you'll care about what the name is, independent of what you think the right answer is. So please make sure you find that email, go in and vote. And yeah, we've got less than 4 weeks to go before the change. I've just got a couple of things to say, which is if you want to be on the committee with a specific named role, come and speak to me and Louise, email us, or come to the AGM social next month. It'll be a delight to have you along. There are several roles up for grabs there, and you can also vote out people who you don't think are doing a good job. Just if you want to, if you really want to throw tomatoes out there.
Timekeeping.
Well, exactly. It's been a long one. Right, let's go to the pub. Thanks, everyone. Everyone online, thank you so much. HQ, thank you as well. All take very good care of yourselves and please vote. Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for coming up. Yeah, I did a rail one last night, which is why I've got these slides handy. Yes, so I did my pitch. Also, which is why I have this.